Hello there, and welcome to my sleepy Chanel. Tonight, we drift together into a forgotten world, a realm filled with strange beings that no longer walk, swim, or fly beside us, yet still quietly shape the planet we know today. This is the domain of extinct animals. Creatures that once breathed beneath unfamiliar skies, moved through forests that have long since vanished, and followed rhythms the earth itself no longer remembers. Their stories are etched into stone, locked in ice, trapped in amber, and carried in memory, patiently waiting for curious minds to notice them once again. As we wander through these ancient worlds, we begin to sense just how fragile and extraordinary life can be. Some of these beings ruled their environments for spans of time beyond imagination, while others flickered briefly, leaving behind only the faintest traces. Together, they form a long and winding narrative of change, chance, resilience, and loss. It is a story that feels distant yet strangely close, reminding us that the living world is always in motion, always becoming something new. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is slow down. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your breathing to deepen, and let your thoughts grow quieter as we step into this ancient world together. Let us begin. Earth has experienced 5 great mass extinctions, each one resetting the story of life. Extinction is not only about individual species fading away. At several moments in deep time, the planet faced global crises so severe that vast portions of life were erased. These events differed in their causes, but their consequences shared familiar patterns. Food webs collapsed, oceans changed their chemistry, climates swung dramatically. Long-established groups vanished, clearing space for new forms to rise. After one such reset, coral reefs rebuilt themselves with entirely different architects. After another, forests and animal communities reorganized into unfamiliar arrangements. The most famous of these events is the asteroid impact that ended the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs. But other mass extinctions were driven by immense volcanic eruptions, shifting sea levels, and rapid episodes of warming or cooling. What truly matters is the idea of a reset. Life does not always move forward smoothly. Sometimes it fractures and then rebuilds itself from whatever survivors remain. Seen through this lens, fossils become more than curiosities. They turn into chapters of a planetary biography, showing that Earth's living surface is dynamic, vulnerable, and endlessly creative in the wake of catastrophe. The giant beaver once built ponds using teeth the size of bananas. This animal took a familiar idea and scaled it into something almost unbelievable. Its front teeth were enormous and built for heavy labor, and like all beavers, they were self-sharpening, staying razor-edged through constant use. In Ice Age North America, A creature like this could reshape wetlands simply by feeding, digging, and altering vegetation. By doing so, it created watery pockets that attracted birds, insects, and fish. Even if its building habits differed from those of modern beavers, its impact on the landscape would still have been profound. A large herbivore specializing in wet habitats becomes a kind of ecosystem architect. Imagine approaching a pond at dusk and watching a broad-backed animal slip silently into the water, leaving ripples that spread outward through a quiet world. Wetlands are engines of biodiversity, and animals that maintain them help build entire communities. When the giant beaver disappeared, it was not merely the loss of an impressive rodent. It was the loss of a natural engineer, one that helped determine where water gathered and where life flourished. Woolly rhinoceroses once grazed across icy grasslands stretching through Eurasia. During the Ice Age, vast plains existed that were so cold and open they resembled frozen oceans of grass. Across them walked a rhinoceros built for winter. Its body carried a thick coat, and its compact shape conserved warmth much like a sturdy cabin holds heat. Rather than browsing trees, it fed on low-growing plants, scraping snow aside to reach dry grasses that other animals struggled to access. Fossils and frozen remains reveal a creature not merely surviving the cold, but thriving within it. It was part of a busy steppe community that included horses, bison, and towering mammoths. Its famous horns were not decorative. They could be used to clear snow, to spar with rivals, and to defend territory on wind-swept ground where hiding was impossible. When climates shifted and habitats shrank, this winter specialist lost its advantage. The world warmed beyond its design, and its time came to an end. A meteor impact ended the age of non-avian dinosaurs in a geological instant. In Earth's history, there are moments that feel like doors slamming shut. This event left a global signature that geologists can still trace today, including unusual chemical markers and evidence of extreme shock, pointing to an impact powerful enough to alter the planet's atmosphere. The aftermath would have been chaos on a scale that is difficult to grasp. Intense heat near the impact zone, enormous waves in nearby seas, and skies choked with dust and soot that dimmed sunlight and cooled global temperatures. Food webs depend on steady energy from the sun, and when that energy is disrupted, consequences cascade from plants to herbivores and onward to predators. What makes this moment so chilling is its speed. Many changes in nature unfold gradually, but this one was abrupt enough to leave a visible boundary in rock layers around the world. It reminds us that life can be resilient over immense spans of time, yet still vulnerable to rare and sudden catastrophes. After the dust settled, survivors faced a reshaped planet, and evolution began writing a new chapter with an entirely different cast. Hobbit-like humans once lived on the island of Flores, sharing their home with oversized storks. On the Indonesian island of Flores, scientists uncovered the remains of a small-bodied human relative that challenged long-held assumptions about what humans could look like. This was not a child and not a myth. It was an adult hominin with a compact build, shaped by island life in ways that still spark debate and fascination. Islands often reshape animals through limited food, isolation, and unusual ecological pressures, and Flores became a kind of evolutionary laboratory. The same island was also home to outsized birds, including enormous storks that must have seemed like living monuments in the landscape, tall enough to make any human pause. Imagine moving through narrow valleys and forest edges while sharing space with birds that could look down on you from above as you navigated volcanic ground and shifting seasons. What makes this scene especially compelling is coexistence. It transforms prehistory into a vivid moment rather than a dusty timeline. Different kinds of humans, strange island giants, and the daily realities of survival, all unfolding on one small patch of Earth. Mammoths still roamed the planet while humans painted caves in Europe. Picture a cold steppe where shaggy giants moved like slow, living hills, their tusks sweeping snow aside to reach winter grass. At the same time, nearby humans gathered by firelight, pressing pigment onto stone walls and leaving behind animal shapes that still stop us in our tracks today. That overlap is startling because it collapses time. Mammoths were not fantasy creatures from an unreachable era. They shared a real world with people who laughed, worried, traveled, and watched the same herds crossing the horizon. Their bodies were tuned for ice with dense fur, thick layers of fat, and small ears that conserved heat. When you look at a cave painting of a mammoth, you are seeing an eyewitness moment, a meeting between imagination and an animal powerful enough to make the ground tremble with every step. The dodo vanished within a single human lifetime after its first encounter with Europeans. On a small island in the Indian Ocean, this stout, flightless bird had lived for generations without mammalian predators. Fear was simply not a useful skill. Then ships arrived, and the rules of survival changed faster than evolution could adapt. Sailors and settlers hunted the birds, but the deeper danger came with what they carried ashore. Pigs, rats, and other introduced animals raided nests, consuming eggs and chicks in a place where ground nesting had once been safe. Forests were altered, and the dodo's limited range meant there was nowhere else to retreat. The speed of its disappearance matters. It shows that extinction is not always a slow fade. Sometimes it is a door slammed shut. The dodo became a symbol of loss, but it was also a warning written in feathers. When an entire species exists in one small home, a few careless years can erase it forever. Saber-toothed cats were not dinosaurs, yet they lived alongside early humans. These famous predators belonged firmly to the mammal world, not the age of dinosaurs, which makes their story feel uncomfortably close. In many regions, humans did not merely find their bones, they shared landscapes with them. Imagine a twilight plain where large prey gather near water and danger can arrive without sound. Saber-toothed cats were built for power, with thick forelimbs capable of wrestling struggling prey to the ground. Their long canines were less like knives and more like delicate tools that required precision. The killing bite came only after the prey was fully controlled. This hunting style paints a picture of careful strategy rather than brute savagery. For early humans, these cats were competition, threat, and likely objects of deep respect. Fossils found near ancient camps and kill sites hint at a tense coexistence. Two intelligent hunters reading the same landscape. Some extinct penguins stood as tall as a grown human. It is strange to imagine a penguin not as a compact bundle of black and white, but as a towering, heavy bird that could meet your gaze eye to eye. Long ago, after certain marine reptiles vanished and before seals and toothed whales fully claimed the oceans, penguins experimented with size. In cooler waters rich with fish and squid, larger bodies could store more heat and dive longer. Their wings transformed into powerful flippers, and their bones grew dense, helping them sink and maneuver underwater like living torpedoes. On land, they would have waddled, but in the sea, they were built for speed and endurance. Fossils show these giants lived along coastlines that feel familiar today, making them seem less mythical and more like missed encounters. If such a penguin walked along a modern beach, it would not feel like a novelty. It would feel like a ruler of the shore. Trilobites thrived for hundreds of millions of years before disappearing entirely. They are a reminder that success does not guarantee survival. Ancient seas once teemed with their diversity, from tiny mud sifters to spiny forms that looked armored for battle. Their segmented bodies resembled finely engineered machines, and some species could curl into tight balls, hiding soft undersides behind hardened shells. Their eyes remain one of the most astonishing details. Many were compound, built from mineral lenses that fossilized beautifully, long after softer tissues vanished. For unimaginable spans of time, trilobites adapted through shifting oceans, drifting continents, and new predators. Then came a sequence of crises that rewrote marine life, and trilobites did not survive the final chapter. When you hold a trilobite fossil, you are holding both endurance and fragility. A creature that ruled its era and still could not outrun planetary change. The passenger pigeon once darkened North American skies, then vanished completely. There was a time when flocks stretched from horizon to horizon, so dense they dimmed daylight like a living eclipse. The sound was said to be thunderous, a storm made of wings. Their numbers were not merely impressive, they were an ecological force. Massive roosts broke branches, fertilized forests, and reshaped habitats. Many other species lived in the wake of that abundance, Then, industrial-scale hunting arrived, and the pigeons fell into a trap built by their own biology. They relied on enormous colonies for breeding and protection. Once the flocks shattered, recovery became harder with each passing season. Railroads and telegraphs allowed hunters to track them efficiently, turning a natural wonder into a commercial target. The final chapter was eerily quiet. A species that once seemed endless dwindled to a handful of captive birds. When the last one died, it delivered a chilling lesson. Even the most common creature can disappear. Thylacines looked like dogs, carried pouches, and wore tiger stripes. This animal was a masterclass in nature's unpredictability. A carnivorous marsupial shaped like a dog, yet raising its young in a pouch like a kangaroo, it stood apart from anything else on Earth. Dark stripes crossed its back, earning it the nickname Tasmanian tiger, but it belonged to a unique evolutionary branch forged by Australia's long isolation. Thylacines hunted with patience and stealth, and their jaws could open remarkably wide, giving them an almost unreal appearance in old film footage. They once ranged across mainland Australia and New Guinea, later surviving primarily in Tasmania as pressures changed elsewhere. Fear, misunderstanding, and bounty programs gradually pushed them into fewer and fewer corners. Livestock losses were often blamed on them, even when dogs or other predators were likely responsible. Captive individuals were filmed and photographed before vanishing, turning the thylacine into one of the most haunting modern extinctions because it unfolded in the age of cameras. This is not ancient history. It is recent enough to feel like a mistake that might still be undone if time allowed. Giant ground sloths once stood upright to browse leaves like living towers. These were not the slow, tree-hugging sloths we know today, but massive plant eaters that could rise onto their hind legs, using strong hips and heavy tails to brace themselves like tripods. With their forelimbs freed, they pulled branches closer, stripping foliage with long, curved claws. Those claws were not built for speed, but for gripping, tearing vegetation, and possibly for defense. In Ice Age landscapes, giant sloths shaped plant communities simply by feeding. They opened patches in forests, created pathways through dense growth, and altered which plants thrived. Their bones reveal powerful muscles, and their immense size hints at a world where being big was a successful strategy against predators and cold. Humans eventually arrived and encountered these giants face to face. In some regions, their disappearance aligns closely with rapid ecological change and hunting pressure, suggesting an ending shaped by multiple forces. What remains is the eerie sense that entire categories of animals once performed roles in ecosystems that no longer have replacements. Ancient sharks once carried spiral tooth whorls, ruling strange prehistoric seas. Among the most surreal fossils ever found are sharks whose teeth did not shed and scatter as they do today. Instead, new teeth rolled forward in a tight spiral, forming a saw-like coil set within the jaw. Cartilage rarely fossilizes, so the exact shape of the animal remains debated. But the tooth spiral itself is unmistakable. These sharks lived long before humans, in oceans filled with unfamiliar fish and early marine reptiles. They likely hunted soft-bodied prey, such as squid, slicing and gripping in ways unlike any modern predator. What makes them so fascinating is how boldly evolution experimented, producing designs that feel impossible until they are seen preserved in stone. When such lineages vanished, they took entire blueprints of life with them. Irish elk carried antlers wider than most doorways. Despite the name, this animal was not truly an elk, but an enormous deer, crowned with antlers that spread wider than a person's outstretched arms. The head became a living chandelier of bone, likely driven by rich grazing lands and intense competition during mating seasons, where display mattered as much as strength. But antlers are costly. They must be grown, carried, and shed each year, demanding immense energy and minerals. In open woodlands and meadows, such antlers were manageable. As environments changed and forests thickened, they became liabilities. The Irish elk's disappearance suggests that even champions of display can be pushed past their limits when resources shrink and landscapes shift. Beauty, in harsh times, can become a burden. Steller's sea cow was hunted to extinction within just a few decades. In the cold waters near the Commander Islands, a gentle giant once drifted through kelp forests like a slow-moving barge of life. Related to manatees and dugongs, it was far larger and perfectly adapted to frigid seas, with thick skin and a massive body that retained heat. It grazed on seaweed, shaping coastal ecosystems simply by feeding and moving. Then shipwrecks and hunting entered the story. Sailors prized its meat and fat as reliable food in a harsh, remote environment. The tragedy lies in the speed. A creature that had survived storms, seasons, and predators for ages was wiped out in a shockingly brief human chapter. Because it lived in the limited region and moved slowly, it had no way to escape once hunters discovered it. Its loss stands as a sharp reminder that even the ocean's most peaceful giants can vanish quickly when demand meets vulnerability. Great auks were flightless seabirds hunted into silence. Along northern coasts, these birds once stood upright like solemn sentinels, built for swimming rather than flying. Their short, strong wings were perfect for chasing fish underwater with efficient strokes, but on land they were clumsy and slow. That awkwardness sealed their fate. Humans approached breeding colonies easily, taking adults, eggs, and feathers in vast numbers. Feathers filled bedding, oil fueled lamps, and the birds themselves became food. Their predictable breeding habits made matters worse. They returned year after year to the same rocky sites, trusting routines that had worked for millennia. As colonies shrank, safety in numbers disappeared. The final individuals were hunted as rare specimens, a grim twist where rarity increased danger. When great auks vanished, an entire style of seabird life vanished with them, leaving the shores quieter than they had been for thousands of years. The Carolina parakeet was North America's only native parrot. It is startling to remember that bright parrots once flashed through forests and river bottoms of the eastern United States. Their green bodies and warm-colored faces stood vivid against the leaves, and their calls brought a tropical sound to a temperate world. They fed on seeds and fruit, traveling in social flocks that could strip a tree bare before moving on like a gust of color. Yet those same flocking habits made them vulnerable. When one bird was shot, others often circled back, drawn by social bonds, only to be killed as well. Deforestation and the loss of nesting sites fractured their world into smaller and smaller pieces. Captive birds lingered briefly, but the wild voice of the species fell silent. This extinction feels especially sharp because it rewrites what we think belongs in North America. A native parrot feels like a surprise, and that surprise makes its absence even more painful. The quagga was a zebra relative marked by stripes only on the front half of its body. It looked as though it existed halfway between two worlds. Bold striping covered its head and shoulders, then gradually faded into a plain brown coat toward the back. This unusual pattern made it instantly recognizable, and later turned it into a symbol of how much variation can exist, even within familiar animal groups. The quagga lived across the grasslands of southern Africa, sharing space with other grazing animals, and adapting to local conditions that shaped its appearance. Then heavy hunting began, paired with increasing competition from livestock. Because it was seen as ordinary at the time, few people believed it needed protection. By the time anyone realized it was truly disappearing, its decline was already too far advanced to reverse. The final individuals survived only in captivity. When they were gone, the quagga became a lesson written in hindsight. It also became scientifically important later, when preserved remains helped demonstrate how closely related it was to modern zebras, and how easily diversity within a species can vanish before we even recognize it as something distinct. Tasmanian tigers, or thylacines, could open their jaws astonishingly wide for a marsupial. Old film footage shows captive individuals yawning, their mouths opening into dramatic arcs that feel almost impossible, as if the skull were hinged like a trap. That wide gape likely helped them grasp prey, and may have worked alongside powerful jaw muscles built for holding and tearing. Yet the fascination with those images is tangled with grief, because they represent some of the last moving glimpses of a vanished predator. Thylacines lived among eucalyptus forests, rugged hills, and nocturnal hunting grounds. They carried their young in pouches, a reminder that mammals can evolve similar predatory roles through completely different family trees. The tragedy lies in misunderstanding. Fear and rumor turned this unique predator into a target. Bounties encouraged killing, and as numbers fell, every remaining individual became more vulnerable to chance, disease, and isolation. The wide jaws are memorable, but the deeper story is one of silence. A remarkable animal was treated as a nuisance, and the result still echoes through Tasmania's imagination. The Barbados raccoon vanished before most people ever knew it existed. On small islands, evolution can create unusual local versions of familiar animals, and then erase them with startling speed. This raccoon was a distinct island form, confined to a limited range where a single hurricane, a new predator, or a shift in land use could change everything. When humans alter an island, there is often no second habitat, no distant population waiting to refill losses. That fragile geography makes extinction feel less like a slow decline and more like a switch being flipped. What makes the Barbados raccoon especially haunting is how briefly it existed in human awareness. It disappeared before it could enter popular memory, before most people could even picture it. This kind of loss is easy to overlook, yet it is common. Many extinctions happen quietly, affecting small populations in small places, without famous photographs or crowded museum displays. They remind us that Earth's biodiversity is not only built from giants and legends, but also from local wonders, each one a unique answer to the question of how to live. The aurochs was the wild ancestor of modern cattle. Imagine encountering a cow that feels like it stepped out of a myth. Tall at the shoulder, long-horned, and built like a living battering ram, the aurochs once roamed Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. It shaped grasslands the way bison do today, moving in herds, grazing, trampling vegetation, and spreading seeds. Predators and humans alike watched these animals carefully. Over time, people began capturing calves, keeping them close, and favoring calmer individuals. Slowly, a fierce, wild creature was transformed into the domesticated cattle that now populate farms across the world. It is a strange realization that so much of modern human life traces back to an animal that was once dangerous to approach. The aurochs did not disappear because it was weak. It vanished because its world was carved apart by hunting and shrinking habitats. Yet its legacy remains alive in every barnyard, a domesticated echo of ancient power. The bluebuck vanished before photography existed. This kind of extinction feels especially haunting because it slipped away before the modern world could truly record it. The bluebuck was a small antelope from southern Africa, described as having a subtle bluish sheen to its coat, a detail that sounds almost unreal, yet the animal was very real. Its range was limited, and once hunting pressure and land changes intensified, it was erased quickly. Because it disappeared before photographs, we are left with vague descriptions, a few preserved skins, and scattered museum specimens that feel more like whispers than portraits. There is no final image to hold on to, only the uneasy knowledge that a species can vanish without ever leaving behind a clear face. The bluebuck reminds us that rarity is not always ancient. Sometimes a creature becomes rare in the blink of an eye, and once it crosses that invisible threshold, recovery becomes nearly impossible, even if regret follows later. The Falkland Islands wolf was the only native land mammal of its remote home. On the windswept Falkland Islands, far out in the South Atlantic, there once lived a fox-like canid found nowhere else on Earth. It occupied a lonely ecological role, acting as both predator and scavenger in an environment dominated by seabirds, harsh weather, and open terrain. Early visitors noted that this animal showed little fear of humans. That calm curiosity was likely the result of evolving without land predators or human hunters. Unfortunately, that same trust became fatal once settlers arrived. As sheep farming expanded, the wolf was blamed for livestock losses and hunted relentlessly. Because it lived on isolated islands, it had nowhere to retreat. There was no distant refuge, no second population waiting beyond the horizon. Its extinction also carries a layer of mystery. Scientists still debate how a canid reached such isolated islands in the first place, whether through ancient land bridges, ice connections, or rafting across water. However it arrived, it became uniquely adapted to the Falklands, and then it was erased, leaving the islands without their only native terrestrial mammal. The Beiji dolphin vanished from the Yangtze River faster than science could save it. Once, this pale and elusive dolphin navigated muddy waters and strong currents using sound rather than sight, thriving in a river where visibility could vanish in an instant. Known locally as a river goddess, it was woven into cultural memory as a gentle presence. Modern pressures arrived all at once. Heavy boat traffic, fishing gear, habitat destruction, and pollution stacked threat upon threat, turning the Yangtze into a dangerous place for any large animal. What makes this extinction especially painful is timing. It happened during an era of conservation awareness, when scientists were actively searching, counting, and warning. Yet the decline was so steep that by the time serious protection efforts were widely attempted, too few individuals remained. The Beiji became a symbol of how quickly a species can fall from endangered to functionally extinct, especially in freshwater systems where escape routes do not exist. Its loss was not only the disappearance of a dolphin, but the ending of an entire river story. The golden toad disappeared after a sudden and mysterious collapse in sightings. In the cloud forests of Costa Rica, there once lived a small amphibian that looked like a spark fallen from the sky. Its skin glowed with a rich golden color against moss and wet leaves, and for years it appeared reliably during breeding seasons. Then, almost without warning, the sightings stopped. Researchers returned again and again, waiting near familiar pools, listening, hoping for movement, and finding nothing. The abruptness of this disappearance is what made the golden toad unforgettable. It became one of the most well-known examples of extinction linked to a complex web of forces, including shifting climate patterns, habitat sensitivity, and disease that can sweep through amphibian populations like invisible fire. Because amphibians breathe through their skin and live between water and land, they often act as early warning signals for environmental stress. The golden toad's loss was not only the disappearance of a beautiful species, but a quiet alarm about how fragile life can be, even in protected places. The dusky seaside sparrow vanished from a single narrow stretch of marshland. Not all extinctions happen on a grand stage. This one unfolded quietly in Florida's coastal wetlands, where reeds sway and the ground itself is soaked with life. The sparrow lived in a very specific habitat, and that tight range made it extremely vulnerable. When marshes were drained, altered, or sprayed to control mosquitoes, its world shrank rapidly. The bird had no mountains to flee to, and no distant forests to recolonize. It had one home, and when that home changed, its options disappeared. What makes this extinction especially poignant is that it occurred during a time when people were already aware of endangered species and attempted interventions. But timing matters. When populations become too small, even well-intentioned efforts can arrive too late. Too few mates, too little genetic diversity, and too much chance can doom a species despite concern. The loss of this sparrow stands as a quiet warning. Protecting a species often means protecting a place, down to the mud, reeds, and water that sustain it. Elephant birds once laid eggs large enough to feed several people. On Madagascar, towering, flightless birds produced eggs so massive they seem unreal, as though someone had scaled a familiar object far beyond its natural limits. These eggs contained enormous amounts of nourishment, making them tempting resources for humans arriving on the island. Elephant birds themselves were heavy, slow-moving giants, adapted to a land without large predators. Like many large birds, they likely laid relatively few eggs and invested heavily in each one. That strategy works in stable environments, but becomes dangerous when new predators and people appear. Madagascar's ecosystems were already unique, filled with animals found nowhere else, and elephant birds were part of that extraordinary fabric. When they vanished, it was not just the loss of a giant, it was the loss of an entire ecological role, a massive herbivore removed from the landscape. Today, fragments of eggshell feel like relics from another world, delicate evidence of an animal that once walked through Madagascar's forests with the weight of a living monument. The Malagasy hippopotamus was a smaller island cousin of today's river giants. Madagascar once hosted hippos that looked very different from the massive river bruisers most people imagine. These island-adapted forms were smaller and shaped by a landscape with fewer predators and very different ecological pressures. Some likely spent much of their time in wetlands and rivers, while others may have been more comfortable on land, moving through forests and along marsh edges. Island environments often bend the rules of size and behavior. Food availability, isolation, and terrain push animals toward unexpected solutions, and these hippos were no exception. They shared Madagascar with giant birds, unusual carnivores, and lemurs that reached sizes almost unimaginable today. Their disappearance follows a familiar island pattern. When humans arrive, landscapes shift through burning, farming, and hunting. Animals that evolved in isolation often struggle to adapt to the speed and scale of change. A hippo on an island cannot simply migrate upstream for miles in search of safety. The map ends. That finality is why island extinctions can feel so swift and absolute. The Malagasy hippos represented a unique evolutionary chapter, and their loss narrowed the island's already precious diversity. Giant lemurs of Madagascar once weighed as much as adult humans. Modern lemurs feel delicate and wide-eyed, leaping lightly through branches. But Madagascar's recent past included lemurs that were heavy-bodied and powerful, with builds approaching human mass. Some were slow and deliberate, adapted for climbing and gripping rather than agile leaps. Their feeding habits would have shaped forests in ways small animals cannot, pruning branches, spreading seeds, and influencing which plants thrived. Imagine the sound of a large primate moving through the canopy at night, leaves rustling, branches snapping, and the sense that something substantial is above you, not just a fleeting shadow. These giant lemurs evolved in isolation, in ecosystems without monkeys or apes, which makes their rise even more remarkable. Their extinction is closely linked to human arrival, habitat change, and hunting pressure. Large animals provide more food per kill and reproduce slowly, making them especially vulnerable. Losing these lemurs was not only the loss of species, it was the loss of ecological jobs that helped maintain Madagascar's forests. Some of the island's modern environmental challenges may echo that ancient absence. The Rodrigues solitaire was a close cousin of the dodo. On Rodrigues Island in the Indian Ocean lived a flightless bird related to the dodo, yet distinct enough to have its own character in the historical record. It was ground-dwelling, strong-legged, and adapted to an island life where wings offered little advantage. Accounts suggest it had a robust build and strong territorial behavior, and it likely fed on fruits and seeds in forests that once covered the island. Like many island birds, it had nowhere else to go. When humans arrived, they brought hunting, habitat disruption, and introduced animals that raided nests. This combination is often fatal for island species, which evolve without fear of new predators and exist in naturally limited numbers. The solitaire's extinction reminds us that the dodo was not an isolated tragedy. It was part of a broader wave of island losses repeated across oceans. Each extinction is like a library burned before its stories were fully read, leaving only fragments and guesses about daily life. Smilodon saber-teeth were fragile, requiring powerful neck muscles. Those famous fangs looked like the perfect weapons, but they came with a flaw. Long, thin teeth can snap if they strike bone at the wrong angle. This meant Smilodon could not simply bite and thrash like many modern predators. Instead, it was engineered for control. Stocky forelimbs helped pin prey in wrestling matches where weight and leverage mattered more than speed. Only after the animal was restrained did the neck and shoulders drive a precise killing bite into softer targets. This hunting style feels almost surgical, like a specialist using a single extraordinary tool with strict rules. That fragility also explains why these cats are thought to have relied on ambush rather than long chases. Their fossils tell a story of immense strength built around a delicate edge, a reminder that evolution often trades brute force for precision. Dire wolves were real and distinct from modern gray wolves. It is tempting to imagine them as simply oversized versions of living wolves, but they were their own lineage, shaped by Ice Age North America. Their build suggests strength and endurance rather than speed, well suited for tackling large, dangerous prey. Imagine packs working together to exhaust massive herbivores, relying on teamwork and pressure rather than a single, swift kill. Their teeth and jaws were built for heavy use, capable of processing large carcasses where nothing could be wasted. As the Ice Age ended, many of the largest prey species declined or disappeared. Competition increased, ecosystems shifted, and the dire wolf's specialized world faded away. Its extinction shows how even familiar body plans can branch into different solutions, dominate for a time, and then vanish. The American lion was larger than most lions alive today. Picture a lion scaled up, with longer limbs and a frame suited for hunting in wide-open spaces. This massive cat lived in Ice Age North America, sharing territory with other formidable predators and herds of enormous prey. Its size hints at a world where being bigger meant dominating rivals, claiming kills, and surviving brutal seasons. Unlike modern lions tied closely to African savannas, this lion prowled the continent of glaciers, grasslands, and roaming megafauna. When such an animal disappears, it removes more than a species. It removes a presence, something that shaped how every other creature moved through the landscape. Short-faced bears were built for speed, not just size. Many people imagine ancient bears as slow, lumbering giants, but this species defied that image completely. with long legs, a tall shoulder line, and a compact face. It was shaped more like a runner than a scavenger. Its stride could cover vast distances efficiently, allowing it to patrol enormous territories. Speed changes the psychology of a predator. If you can arrive quickly, you can intimidate other carnivores, claim carcasses, and force even confident hunters to retreat. Some researchers believe short-faced bears relied heavily on scavenging and dominance, while others argue they could hunt when needed. Either way, this was an animal that shaped the behavior of everything around it, including humans moving through open terrain. As Ice Age ecosystems shifted and large prey declined, this bear's advantages faded. Its disappearance reminds us that danger in the past did not always come from stealth. Sometimes it came from something massive that could still outrun you. Cave lions lived in Ice Age Europe alongside mammoths. When imagining Europe during the Ice Age, it is easy to picture empty, frozen plains. In reality, these landscapes were alive with powerful predators. Cave lions stalked snowy valleys and open grasslands, hunting large herbivores and sharing territory with humans. They were similar to modern lions, yet distinct enough to feel like a parallel version, adapted to colder climates and different prey. Their presence is not known only from bones. Humans painted them on cave walls, capturing their outlines with the same care given to horses and bison. This tells us people saw them clearly, feared them, and remembered them. Imagine traveling through twilight terrain where fresh tracks in the snow could signal a predator moving along the same route. The extinction of cave lions removed a key character from Europe's ancient story and reminds us that the continent once hosted predators now associated with distant lands. Cave hyenas once roamed Europe, far from their modern African relatives. These hyenas were powerful bone crushers, specialists in extracting every scrap of nutrition from a carcass. That efficiency made them remarkably successful. Their dens, often found in caves, became natural archives filled with chewed bones. Each fragment tells a story about what lived nearby, what was hunted, and how energy moved through the ecosystem. These hyenas competed with wolves, lions, and humans, adding tension to every kill site. Approaching a carcass meant risking an encounter with an animal built to defend food aggressively. The cave hyena shows how different ancient ecosystems could be. Europe was not only a land of deer and bears, but of formidable scavengers shaping survival itself. Saber-toothed cats were swift hunters, with shorter blades than Smilodon. Not all saber-toothed cats carried the same weapons. Scimitar cats had shorter, curved canines shaped like elegant blades rather than long daggers. This likely made them less fragile and better suited for faster pursuits. Their long limbs and athletic builds suggest a predator capable of chasing prey across open ground, closing distance quickly before delivering a precise strike. While still requiring accuracy, these teeth allowed for a slightly broader margin of error. This variation highlights how extinct predators were not simply oversized versions of modern animals. They were experiments, each testing a different balance between speed, power, and risk. When the scimitar cat vanished, it took with it an entire hunting strategy. Terror birds were giant flightless predators that ran down prey. Imagine meeting a bird that does not fly because it does not need to. These animals were tall, fast, and armed with massive skulls and crushing beaks. Their long legs suggest speed across open ground, turning plains into chase arenas. Birds are often thought of as prey or small hunters, but here, the bird was the apex predator. Danger arrived upright, silent, and fast. As environments changed and new predators appeared, terror birds lost their advantage. Yet their story remains one of evolution's boldest ideas, proving that nature can turn almost any blueprint into a top hunter. The marsupial lion was Australia's top mammal predator, though it was not a true lion. This animal was more closely related to wombats and koalas, yet it filled a role strikingly similar to big cats elsewhere. Its body was compact and muscular, built for ambush and control rather than speed. Powerful forelimbs and slicing teeth allowed it to grip prey effectively. It lived in a world where giant marsupials dominated the landscape, creating an ecosystem unlike anything alive today. When humans arrived and conditions shifted, many of these large animals vanished, and the marsupial lion disappeared with them. It stands as a reminder that Australia's modern wildlife represents only a fragment of a much stranger past. Giant wombats once rivaled small cars in mass. Modern wombats look sturdy and solid, but their extinct relatives were built on a completely different scale. These massive herbivores moved slowly through Australian landscapes, using sheer bulk as protection rather than speed or aggression. Their powerful limbs allowed them to dig and manipulate the ground, reshaping soil and vegetation simply by existing. Like many large grazers, they likely created pathways, cleared areas, and influenced plant growth through constant movement and feeding. A world with giant wombats would have felt heavy, grounded, and profoundly physical. When climates shifted and humans arrived, slow-moving megafauna faced intense pressure. Reproducing slowly and requiring large amounts of food, these giants were poorly suited to rapid environmental change. Their disappearance removed another foundational species from Australia's ancient ecosystems. Giant kangaroos did not hop the way modern kangaroos do. Their bodies were heavier, their limbs thicker, and their movement more deliberate. Instead of bounding across open ground, they likely walked or moved in slow, powerful strides, conserving energy and stability. This challenges the familiar image of kangaroos as perpetual jumpers. Evolution does not lock animals into one solution. It explores multiple paths until circumstances favor one over another. When environments changed, the more agile, hopping kangaroos gained an advantage, while the heavy walkers faded away. These extinct kangaroos remind us that today's wildlife represents survivors, not the full range of possibilities that once existed. Diprotodon was the largest marsupial to ever live. Imagine a wombat scaled to the size of a rhinoceros, moving through open woodlands and plains. Diprotodon fed on shrubs and leaves, shaping vegetation across vast areas. Its size suggests a life without many natural predators, relying on mass and endurance to survive. Herds of these animals would have been a dominant presence, changing landscapes simply through grazing and trampling. When humans arrived and climates became drier, pressure mounted.
large, slow-breeding animals could not adapt quickly enough. Diprotodon's extinction marked the end of Australia's megafaunal era, closing a chapter filled with giants. Procoptodon was a short-faced giant kangaroo with enormous arms. This animal looked almost unreal, with a flat face, powerful forelimbs, and a posture that suggests upright feeding. It may have reached branches like a browsing herbivore rather than grazing on the ground. Its hands were capable of gripping, hinting at feeding strategies unlike those of any living kangaroo. This diversity of form shows how much evolutionary creativity once existed within familiar groups. The loss of Procoptodon narrowed not just species counts, but behavioral possibilities. A unique way of interacting with plants vanished with it. Megalania was a monitor lizard the size of a bus. This was not a sluggish reptile. It was a fast, intelligent predator, related to modern Komodo dragons, but far larger. Its bite likely carried venom, making it even more dangerous. Sharing a landscape with Megalania would have required constant awareness. It could ambush, pursue, and overpower prey, including large mammals. Early humans in Australia may have encountered this predator directly, adding a chilling dimension to their world. As megafauna disappeared, Megalania lost prey and territory. Its extinction removed one of the most formidable reptiles to ever walk on land. Giant tortoises once lived on continents, not only on remote islands. Today, giant tortoises feel like rare curiosities, limited to places such as the Galapagos or Aldabra. In the past, however, enormous tortoises walked across large parts of the world, including mainland regions where humans eventually settled. These slow-moving herbivores shaped vegetation through grazing and seed dispersal. Their heavy shells offered protection, allowing them to live long lives in relatively stable environments. When such animals vanish, the loss is measured not only in years, but in centuries of accumulated ecological influence. As humans expanded and hunted them for food, their slow pace became a fatal disadvantage. On continents, pressure came quickly and from many directions. What remains today are isolated survivors, reminders of a much broader ancient distribution. The Caribbean was once home to many species of giant ground sloths. Islands across the Caribbean hosted their own unique sloths, each adapted to local forests and climates. Some climbed trees, others moved heavily along the ground, but all shared a slow metabolism suited to stable conditions. When humans arrived, these island giants faced familiar threats. Hunting and habitat change moved faster than adaptation. Because each island species was confined to a small area, extinction unfolded rapidly. These losses transformed Caribbean ecosystems, removing large herbivores that once shaped forests. Without them, plant communities changed, and entire ecological pathways disappeared quietly. The moanalo were giant, flightless ducks that browsed like geese. On the Hawaiian Islands, evolution produced ducks that abandoned flight and grew large. These birds fed on leaves and shrubs, filling niches usually occupied by mammals elsewhere. They shaped plant life through grazing and pruning, acting as ecosystem engineers in a land without native-hoofed animals. Their bodies and beaks reflect a lifestyle far removed from the image of a typical duck. Human arrival ended this experiment quickly. Hunting and introduced predators wiped them out, leaving Hawaiian ecosystems permanently altered. The absence of large herbivores is still felt today. The Stevens Island wren was eliminated by a single introduced predator. This small, flightless bird lived only on one island and evolved without mammals. When a lighthouse keeper arrived with a cat, the outcome was devastating. Although the story is often simplified, it represents a broader truth. Small populations with no defenses against new predators can collapse astonishingly fast. The wren vanished before conservation could even be imagined. Its extinction became a symbol, not because it was unique in outcome, but because it so clearly illustrated how fragile isolated species can be. The Pyrenean ibex was declared extinct, then briefly returned through cloning. This mountain goat once lived in rugged terrain between Spain and France. Habitat loss and hunting reduced its numbers until only one individual remained. Scientists attempted a bold experiment, using preserved genetic material to clone the species.
For a short time, a cloned ibex lived, breathing life back into a vanished lineage. However, it survived only minutes. This moment was historic. It showed both the promise and the limits of technology. Extinction can sometimes be nudged, but it cannot yet be reversed in a lasting way. The gastric brooding frog gave birth through its mouth. This frog performed one of the strangest reproductive acts known to science. After swallowing fertilized eggs, the female suppressed stomach acid, turning her stomach into a nursery. Young frogs later emerged from her mouth fully formed. This extraordinary adaptation vanished quickly, possibly due to disease and environmental change. Its loss closed the door on an evolutionary solution so unusual that it still feels like science fiction. When such a species disappears, we lose not only an animal, but a biological idea. The saber-toothed salmon once carried fangs as long as human fingers. Despite its fearsome name, this fish was not a relentless predator. Instead, its dramatic teeth were likely used for display and competition rather than hunting. During spawning season, males grew elongated, curved fangs that made them look almost monstrous as they returned upstream. These salmon lived in ancient rivers of the Pacific Northwest, sharing waters with creatures both familiar and strange. Their bodies followed the classic salmon blueprint, but their exaggerated features show how sexual selection can push evolution toward extremes that feel unnecessary, yet effective in the context of reproduction. When environmental conditions shifted and river systems changed, this spectacular experiment ended. The saber-toothed salmon reminds us that not all dramatic traits are about survival in combat. Some are about visibility, dominance, and the silent contests that decide who gets to pass genes forward. The Atlas bear was Africa's only native bear species. Living in the forests and mountains of North Africa, this bear occupied a role now completely absent from the continent. Roman writings describe bears used in arenas, suggesting human exploitation played a role in their decline. Habitat loss and hunting likely combined to push the Atlas bear toward extinction. As forests retreated and human settlements expanded, space for a large omnivore vanished. The disappearance of this bear rewrote Africa's ecological history, leaving the continent without a native bear species. Its absence is a reminder that modern wildlife distributions reflect loss as much as presence. What feels natural today is often a fragment of a much richer past. The Japanese sea lion once hauled out along busy coastlines. This marine mammal lived near human activity long before its disappearance. It bred on rocky shores and fed in coastal waters, overlapping directly with fishing industries. As demand for oil, meat, and space increased, pressure mounted. Hunting reduced numbers quickly, and war-related disruption during the 20th century delivered the final blows. Unlike ancient extinctions, this one unfolded in full view of modern society. Photographs and records exist, yet they could not stop the decline. The Japanese sea lion became another example of how proximity to humans can accelerate extinction rather than prevent it. The Xerces blue butterfly vanished from an urban landscape. This small, delicate insect once fluttered along the sand dunes of what is now San Francisco. As the city expanded, its habitat was paved, landscaped, and transformed. Butterflies often depend on specific host plants, and when those plants disappear, survival becomes impossible. The Xerces blue was lost before conservation laws could protect it, turning a vibrant, living species into a historical footnote. Its extinction shows that loss does not only happen in distant jungles or remote islands. It can happen quietly, beneath sidewalks and streets, as cities grow. The Tasmanian emu was smaller than its mainland relatives. This flightless bird lived on Tasmania and evolved separately from larger emus elsewhere. Like many island forms, it adapted to local conditions, becoming distinct in size and behavior. When humans arrived, hunting pressure mounted quickly. With a limited range and slow reproduction, the Tasmanian emu disappeared rapidly. Its extinction reminds us that islands repeatedly produce unique forms and, just as repeatedly, lose them. Each vanished island species narrows the story of what life can become when isolated. The giant moa's extinction reshaped New Zealand forever. With the loss of multiple moa species, forests changed dramatically. Plants that once evolved alongside browsing birds lost their primary consumers. This ripple effect shows how extinctions alter more than species lists. They change interactions, growth patterns, and the future path of entire ecosystems. The absence of moas is still written into New Zealand's landscapes. When a dominant herbivore disappears, the silence it leaves behind can last for centuries. The Steller's sea cow was hunted out of existence in less than 30 years. In the cold waters near the Commander Islands, this enormous marine mammal once drifted slowly through kelp forests, grazing like a floating meadow. It was a relative of manatees and dugongs, but far larger, heavier, and perfectly adapted to frigid seas. Its thick skin and dense body conserved heat, allowing it to survive in waters too cold for most grazers. Because it fed close to shore and moved slowly, it was easy for sailors to approach. Ship crews, stranded or passing through, relied on its meat and fat as a dependable food source. The speed of its disappearance is what makes the story so unsettling. An animal that had survived countless storms and natural changes vanished almost as soon as humans took notice. Its extinction stands as one of the clearest examples of how quickly abundance can collapse when vulnerability meets exploitation. The great auk was a flightless seabird built for the sea, not the land. Upright and solemn in appearance, it used powerful wings as flippers, diving efficiently after fish in cold northern waters. On land, however,
it was clumsy and slow. This imbalance proved fatal. Humans harvested great auks in enormous numbers for food, oil, and feathers. Because the birds nested in dense colonies and returned to the same rocky sites year after year, they were tragically predictable. As numbers dwindled, rarity increased danger. The final individuals were hunted not just for use, but for collection. When the last pair was killed, an entire way of life vanished with them. The oceans lost a swimmer shaped by a different evolutionary logic. The Carolina parakeet once brought flashes of green to eastern forests. It was the only parrot native to North America, living in social flocks that moved like bursts of color through river valleys and woodlands. Their sociability became a liability. When one bird was shot, others often returned, drawn by calls and bonds, only to be killed as well. Habitat loss and feather hunting compounded the pressure, breaking populations into fragments that could not recover. Its extinction rewrote expectations of what belonged on the continent. The idea of a native parrot now feels surprising, and that surprise sharpens the sense of loss. Haast's eagle ruled New Zealand's skies as a true apex predator. With massive talons and powerful legs, it hunted the giant moa, dropping from above with lethal precision. This was a bird strong enough to kill prey many times its own weight. When humans hunted moa to extinction, the eagle lost its primary food source. A specialist without its cornerstone prey cannot adapt easily. As forests changed and food vanished, the eagle followed its prey into disappearance. This paired extinction shows how deeply species can be linked. Remove one pillar, and another can fall soon after. Moa birds were towering wingless giants. They filled ecological roles similar to deer or large grazers elsewhere, shaping forests through browsing and movement. Their size and lack of predators allowed them to thrive for thousands of years. Human arrival changed everything. Hunting and habitat alteration pushed these slow-reproducing birds past recovery. Today, their bones feel almost unreal, like remnants from a forgotten world that existed not so long ago. Their absence still echoes in New Zealand's ecosystems, where no animal fully replaces their role. The quagga was a zebra relative with a fading pattern. Stripes covered only the front half of its body, dissolving into brown toward the back. This unusual appearance made it instantly recognizable, yet also deceptively ordinary. Because it was seen as common and unremarkable, it received no protection. Heavy hunting and competition with livestock erased it before conservation could intervene. Only after its disappearance did people realize what had been lost. The quagga became an early lesson in hindsight, showing how easily variation within a species can vanish before it is understood. The thylacine, often called the Tasmanian tiger, could open its jaws astonishingly wide. Old film footage shows a captive animal yawning, its mouth stretching into an arc that feels almost unreal, as if the skull were hinged. That wide gape likely helped it grasp and control prey, paired with strong jaw muscles built for holding rather than crushing. This predator lived among eucalyptus forests, rugged hills, and open plains, hunting mostly at night. Though it looked like a dog, it was a marsupial, carrying its young in a pouch, a reminder that similar body shapes can emerge from very different evolutionary paths. Fear and misunderstanding sealed its fate. Farmers blamed thylacines for livestock losses, often without evidence, and bounties encouraged widespread killing. As numbers fell, disease, isolation, and bad luck finished what persecution began. Because it vanished in the age of photography, its extinction feels especially close, like a mistake frozen on film. The Barbados raccoon disappeared before most people ever knew it existed. Island species often evolve into distinct local forms, then vanish quickly once conditions change. This raccoon lived only on Barbados, its entire world confined to a small landmass. When humans altered the island through development, hunting, and introduced species, there was no second population waiting elsewhere. Its extinction happened quietly, without headlines or last photographs, making it easy to overlook. Yet its loss represents a common pattern. Many extinctions are silent, affecting small populations in small places, disappearing before they ever become familiar. The aurochs was the wild ancestor of modern cattle. Towering, muscular, and dangerous to approach, this wild bull once roamed Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. Herds shaped landscapes through grazing and movement, influencing plant growth and soil patterns. Over time, humans captured calves and selected calmer individuals, slowly transforming a fierce animal into domesticated cattle. As farming expanded and wild habitats shrank, the aurochs itself vanished. Its legacy lives on in every pasture. Modern cows are echoes of a powerful, wild past, a reminder that domestication often survives where wilderness does not. The bluebuck vanished before photography could record it. This small antelope from southern Africa reportedly carried a faint bluish sheen to its coat, a detail now lost to uncertainty. By the time scientists took notice, it was already gone. We are left with descriptions, skins, and bones, but no moving image, no final moment. That absence makes the extinction feel hazy, like a story told through fog. The bluebuck reminds us that species can disappear without ever truly entering human memory. The Falkland Islands wolf was the only native land mammal on those remote islands. Fox-like in appearance, it lived without fear of humans, having evolved in isolation without land predators. That calm curiosity proved fatal. As settlers introduced livestock, the wolf was blamed for losses and hunted relentlessly. With nowhere else to go, extinction followed quickly. Its disappearance left the islands without their only native terrestrial mammal, a missing piece of identity that still raises questions about how it arrived there in the first place. The Baiji dolphin vanished from the Yangtze River in modern times. This pale river dolphin navigated muddy waters using sound rather than sight, living in one of the world's busiest waterways. Industrialization brought boat traffic, fishing gear, pollution, and noise, stacking threats faster than conservation could respond. Even as scientists searched desperately, the population collapsed. Its loss is especially painful because it happened in an era of awareness. The Baiji became a symbol of how quickly a species can slide from endangered to gone, particularly in freshwater systems where escape routes do not exist. The golden toad vanished almost overnight. In the misty cloud forests of Costa Rica, this small amphibian once appeared reliably during breeding season, glowing like a living ember against moss and wet leaves. For years, its return felt certain, part of the forest's rhythm. Then, sightings collapsed. Researchers returned again and again to familiar pools, waiting for flashes of gold that never came. The suddenness is what made the golden toad unforgettable. It became one of the most famous examples of a rapid extinction linked to climate shifts, disease, and environmental sensitivity. Amphibians breathe through their skin and live between land and water, making them especially vulnerable. The golden toad's disappearance was not only the loss of a beautiful species, it was a warning signal, sharp and unsettling, about how fragile life can be in changing conditions. The dusky sea-sign sparrow vanished from a single marshland home. It lived in a narrow stretch of Florida's coastal wetlands, where reeds swayed and the ground itself seemed alive with water. That tight range made the bird extremely vulnerable. When marshes were drained, altered, and sprayed for mosquito control, its habitat shrank beyond recovery. Even as conservation efforts began, timing worked against it. Small populations face overwhelming odds, where chance events can undo years of protection. Its extinction is a quiet lesson. Saving a species often means saving a place, down to the mud, grasses, and water levels that define it. Elephant birds laid eggs larger than any living birds. On Madagascar, these towering, flightless giants produced eggs so large they feel almost unreal, like scaled-up echoes of something familiar. Each egg held enough nourishment to feed multiple people. That abundance became a temptation. For humans arriving on the island, collecting eggs was easier than hunting adults. Combined with habitat change, this pressure proved devastating. Because elephant birds laid few eggs and invested heavily in each one, recovery was impossible. Their disappearance was not just the loss of a giant, it was the removal of a major herbivore, an ecological force that once shaped Madagascar's landscapes. The Malagasy hippopotamus was a small island cousin of river giants. Unlike modern hippos, these animals were adapted to island life, some spending more time on land, moving through forests and marsh edges. Island environments rewrite the rules. Limited space, altered predators, and changing food sources push animals toward surprising forms. When humans arrived, fire, farming, and hunting shifted the balance too quickly. With nowhere else to retreat, the Malagasy hippos vanished. Their extinction narrowed an already unique evolutionary story, leaving Madagascar quieter and less heavy than it once was. Giant lemurs once moved through Madagascar's forests. These primates were far larger than any living lemur, some weighing as much as adult humans. Built for strength rather than speed, they climbed deliberately and fed in ways that shaped the forest canopy. Their presence influenced seed dispersal, branch growth, and forest structure. When humans arrived, hunting pressure likely focused on these large, slow-reproducing animals. Their disappearance removed not just species, but entire ecological roles. Modern forests still reflect that absence, growing differently without their ancient partners. The Rodriguez solitaire was a close relative of the dodo. Flightless and ground-dwelling, it lived on the small island of Rodriguez, adapted to a life without mammalian predators. Like the dodo, it had nowhere to flee. Hunting, habitat disturbance, and introduced animals combined into a familiar island tragedy. Its extinction shows that the dodo was not an isolated case, but part of a broader wave of loss. Each vanished island bird represents a library burned before it could be fully read. Smilodon's saber teeth were fragile, demanding a precise way of hunting. Those famous fangs looked like perfect weapons, but they carried a risk. Long, narrow teeth can snap if they strike bone at the wrong angle. Because of this, Smilodon could not simply bite and thrash like many modern predators. Instead, it relied on control. Thick, powerful forelimbs helped pin large prey, turning the hunt into a close, physical struggle. Once the animal was restrained, strong neck muscles drove a careful killing bite into softer areas. This method feels almost surgical, built around one extraordinary tool used with strict discipline.
That design explains why these cats are often imagined as ambush hunters. The first moments of the attack mattered most. Their fossils tell a story of power organized around delicacy, an evolutionary trait where precision replaced brute force. Dire wolves were real and distinct from today's gray wolves. Though often imagined as oversized versions of modern wolves, they were a separate lineage, shaped by a different world. Ice Age North America offered massive prey, and dire wolves evolved bodies built for strength and endurance rather than speed alone. Their jaws and teeth suggest a predator meant to process large, tough meals. Packs likely relied on cooperation, surrounding prey and wearing it down, rather than delivering a single, quick kill. When the Ice Age ended and many large herbivores declined, that strategy became harder to sustain. Competition, ecological change, and shrinking prey options pushed dire wolves into extinction. They remind us that even familiar animal forms can hide very different evolutionary solutions. The American lion was larger than most lions alive today. This powerful cat lived in North America during the Ice Age, hunting across open plains and varied landscapes. Its long limbs and robust build suggest a predator capable of tackling formidable prey. Unlike modern lions associated with African savannas, this lion prowled the continent shaped by glaciers, grasslands, and enormous herds. Its presence reframes North America as a place that once hosted its own version of classic big cat drama. When such a predator disappears, the loss is more than numerical. It removes a presence, an influence that once shaped how other animals moved, fed, and survived. Short-faced bears were built for speed, not just size. Despite their massive appearance, these bears had long legs and a body structure suited for covering ground efficiently. They were likely able to move faster than expected, changing how other predators behaved around them. Some scientists believe they relied heavily on intimidation and scavenging, arriving quickly to claim carcasses. Others argue they could hunt when needed. Either way, their presence would have dominated open landscapes. Their disappearance fits the broader pattern of Ice Age giants fading as ecosystems reorganized. They remind us that danger in the past did not always come quietly. Sometimes it arrived fast and towering. Cave lions lived in Ice Age Europe alongside mammoths. These lions were close relatives of modern lions, but adapted to colder climates and different prey. They hunted across open grasslands and snowy valleys. Humans did not just encounter them in life, they painted them. Cave art shows lions rendered with care, proving that people watched them closely and remembered them vividly. That connection makes their extinction feel personal. With their disappearance, Europe lost one of its most powerful predators. The continent's ancient landscapes were once far wilder than they appear today. The cave hyena thrived far from modern African savannas. Europe's Ice Age hyenas were bone-crushing specialists, capable of consuming nearly every part of a carcass. Their dens became archives of ancient ecosystems, filled with chewed bones and fragments. They competed with wolves, lions, and humans, adding tension to any kill site. Approaching a carcass was never simple when hyenas might arrive at any moment. Their extinction shows how different Europe's past fauna truly was. The continent once hosted fierce scavengers that reshaped landscapes through jaws built like tools. Scimitar-toothed cats were built for speed and pursuit. Unlike Smilodon, whose long saber teeth demanded careful control, these cats carried shorter, curved blades that were stronger and less fragile. Their bodies were long-limbed and athletic, suggesting a predator capable of chasing prey across open ground rather than relying only on ambush. This design points to a different hunting philosophy. Speed replaced brute restraint, and momentum became part of the weapon. Scimitar-toothed cats likely struck quickly, using precision and motion rather than prolonged struggle. Their extinction removed yet another specialized strategy from the predator landscape, narrowing the range of how large cats could hunt. Terror birds were flightless predators that ruled through speed and intimidation. Standing tall on powerful legs, these birds turned open plains into hunting grounds. They did not need flight because their danger came from pursuit, not escape. Their massive skulls and hooked beaks were built to deliver crushing blows. A terror bird closing in would have been a startling sight, danger arriving upright, fast, and silent. In parts of South America, they filled roles that mammals would later claim, showing how flexible evolution can be. As ecosystems changed and new competitors arrived, terror birds lost their advantage. Their extinction ended one of evolution's boldest experiments, where birds became dominant land predators. The marsupial lion was Australia's apex mammalian hunter. Despite the name, it was not closely related to true lions. Instead, it evolved from herbivorous marsupial ancestors, transforming into a powerful carnivore. Its body was compact and muscular, built for ambush rather than endurance. Strong forelimbs and slicing teeth allowed it to grip prey effectively, even large animals. In a land dominated by giant marsupials, it held the top predator role. When humans arrived and megafauna declined, the marsupial lion's world collapsed. Its extinction marked the end of a uniquely Australian solution to predation. Giant wombats once reshaped Australia's ground itself. These enormous herbivores were far larger than modern wombats, moving slowly and steadily through open landscapes. Their bulk and digging behavior influenced soil structure, vegetation patterns, and water flow. Such animals act as living engineers. When they vanish, landscapes change in subtle but lasting ways. The disappearance of giant wombats left Australia's ecosystems lighter, quieter, and less physically shaped by large bodies. Giant kangaroos did not hop like their modern relatives. Their heavier frames and thick limbs suggest a slower, more deliberate style of movement. Rather than bounding, they likely walked upright for long distances, browsing vegetation at heights unreachable to smaller animals. This diversity of movement shows that modern kangaroos represent just one surviving solution. Many others were tested, thrived for a time, and then disappeared as conditions shifted. Diprotodon was the largest marsupial to ever exist. With a body comparable in size to a rhinoceros, it dominated Australian landscapes. Herds of these animals would have shaped vegetation across vast areas, grazing, trampling, and opening space for other species. Its extinction closed the chapter on Australia's megafauna era. The land itself would have felt different afterward, less crowded with giants. Procoptodon, a short-faced giant kangaroo, fed like a browser rather than a grazer. Its powerful arms and upright posture allowed it to reach branches, pulling vegetation closer in a way unseen in modern kangaroos. This unusual feeding strategy vanished with the species. Evolution lost not just an animal, but an entire behavioral idea. Megalania was a giant monitor lizard that stood among the largest terrestrial reptiles ever. Related to modern Komodo dragons, it was fast, intelligent, and likely venomous. Sharing a landscape with such a predator would have demanded constant awareness. Its extinction removed one of the most formidable reptiles to ever dominate land ecosystems. Giant tortoises once walked across continents, not just remote islands. Today, these slow-moving giants feel rare and isolated, limited to a few protected places. In the past, however, enormous tortoises lived across wide mainland regions, shaping vegetation through grazing and seed dispersal. Their long lives allowed them to influence ecosystems over centuries. A single individual could outlive generations of other animals, slowly molding the landscape simply by feeding and moving. When such creatures disappear, the loss stretches across time as well as space. Humans hunted them for food, and their slow pace offered little defense. On continents, pressure mounted quickly. What survives today are only fragments of a once global presence. The Caribbean once hosted many species of giant ground sloths. Each major island had its own unique forms, shaped by isolation and local forests. Some climbed trees, others moved heavily along the ground, all adapted to stable island conditions. Human arrival ended that stability. Hunting and habitat change spread rapidly, and because each species existed in a limited area, extinction followed swiftly. Forests changed without their largest herbivores, altering plant composition and growth patterns. These losses happened quietly, leaving little trace beyond bones and altered landscapes. The moanalo were giant flightless ducks of Hawaii. In a land without native grazing mammals, these birds evolved to fill that role. They browsed shrubs and leaves, shaping plant life in ways ducks elsewhere never did.
Their bodies and beaks reflected a lifestyle far removed from swimming ponds. Instead, they walked, fed, and influenced forests like living gardeners. When humans arrived, hunting and introduced predators ended this experiment rapidly. Hawaiian ecosystems still carry the mark of that absence. The Stevens Island wren vanished due to a single introduced predator. This tiny, flightless bird lived only on one small island and evolved without mammals. When a cat was introduced, the population collapsed with shocking speed. Though the story is often simplified, it represents a broader truth. Isolated species without defenses against new predators can disappear almost instantly. The wren became a symbol, not because it was unique, but because it made extinction painfully easy to understand. The Pyrenean ibex briefly returned through cloning, then vanished again. After the last individual died, scientists attempted to revive the species using preserved genetic material. For a short time, a cloned ibex lived, breathing life into a lineage thought gone forever. It survived only minutes. That moment was historic, revealing both the promise and the limits of technology. Extinction can sometimes be nudged, but not yet undone. The gastric brooding frog gave birth through its mouth. This frog swallowed fertilized eggs and suppressed stomach acid, turning its stomach into a nursery. Young frogs later emerged fully formed. This extraordinary adaptation disappeared rapidly, likely due to disease and environmental change. With its loss, an entire biological solution vanished, never to be repeated. The Xerces blue butterfly vanished beneath a growing city. This small, vivid insect once lived among coastal sand dunes where San Francisco now stands. Its life was closely tied to specific plants that thrived in that shifting, sandy environment. As development advanced, dunes were leveled, vegetation replaced, and the butterfly's world disappeared quietly beneath streets and buildings. There was no dramatic final moment, no mass hunt, only steady transformation. By the time anyone noticed, it was already gone. This extinction is unsettling because it feels familiar. It reminds us that loss does not always happen in distant rainforests or remote islands. Sometimes it happens beneath sidewalks, unnoticed, as cities expand. The Japanese sea lion lived alongside humans for generations before vanishing. It hauled out on rocky shores, bred near busy coastlines, and fed in waters shared with fishing communities. Unlike many extinct animals, it did not live far from people. Hunting for oil and meat reduced its numbers steadily. Later, war and industrial expansion delivered the final blows. Even with photographs, records, and awareness, the species could not withstand sustained pressure. Its extinction shows that proximity to humans does not guarantee protection. Sometimes it accelerates loss. The Tasmanian emu was smaller than its mainland relatives. Living only on Tasmania, it evolved separately, adapting to local conditions. Like many island species, it existed in limited numbers and reproduced slowly. When humans arrived, hunting pressure mounted rapidly. Within a short time, the Tasmanian emu disappeared completely. Its extinction followed a pattern repeated across islands worldwide, where uniqueness and vulnerability intersect. The Falkland Islands wolf was erased from its isolated home. Calm and curious around humans,
It had no instinct to flee. Settlers hunted it as livestock expanded, leaving the islands without their only native land mammal. Its disappearance still raises questions about how it reached the Falklands in the first place. However it arrived, it became perfectly adapted to that environment and then vanished. Many extinct animals shared the same traits. They evolved in isolation, trusted stable environments, or depended on specific habitats. When change came quickly, they had no time to adjust. Extinction often followed not from weakness, but from specialization. Being perfectly adapted to yesterday's world can become a disadvantage when tomorrow arrives too fast. What unites these stories is not just loss, but silence. A gradual quieting of voices, movements, and rhythms that once filled landscapes. Each disappearance reshaped ecosystems in ways still unfolding today. As you listen, remember that extinction is not only a story of the past. It is an ongoing process shaped by choices, awareness, and care. The fossils, bones, and names we remember are reminders of what once was and what can still be protected. As we come to the end of this quiet journey, it becomes clear that extinct animals are not only relics of the distant past. They are reflections of change, reminders that life on Earth is always in motion, always responding to shifting conditions, chance events, and human choices. Some of these creatures vanished millions of years ago, swept away by forces far beyond control. Others disappeared only recently, in moments still recorded by memory, photographs, and written words. Together, they tell a single story about fragility and resilience, about how quickly abundance can fade, and how deeply each species is woven into the world around it. Every extinction reshapes the future. When one voice goes silent, the entire chorus changes. Forests grow differently. Rivers flow without familiar shadows. Skies feel emptier, even if we do not immediately notice. These changes ripple outward, quietly altering what comes next. Yet within these stories, there is also awareness. To know what has been lost is to understand what still remains. Curiosity, care, and attention are powerful tools. They slow the pace of loss and help protect the fragile threads that still hold ecosystems together. As your thoughts begin to soften and your breathing slows, let these ancient lives drift gently into rest. Imagine the landscapes they once shaped, the paths they walked, the waters they swam, and the skies they filled. Then allow those images to fade, like footprints in sand, leaving behind a sense of calm and quiet wonder. Thank you for spending this time here. If you found comfort or curiosity along the way, feel free to return whenever you need another gentle journey through science, history, and the living world. For now, rest. Let the past settle. Let the present quiet. And let sleep come easily.